All right, Jets fans, I know you're probably tired of hearing that you're a Super Bowl team this year, but I'm going to tell you guys exactly how you can win the Super Bowl this year. And I'm going to do this for all 16 AFC teams. We're going to go through every single division, starting from the first place team to the bottom place team. And I'm going to tell you what I think the keys are for them to win the Super Bowl. Welcome to my channel, The P Factor. I'm your host, P. And before we get into this video, I want to just say that we're not gonna make crazy assumptions here like, oh, the Browns need to get Patrick Mahomes. We're gonna be realistic here based on the research I've done about their cap space, their draft capital, impending free agents, the current state of the league. And yeah, that's how we're gonna approach this. And when I refer to cap space, I'm talking about effective cap space. That's the cap space a team has after signing at least 51 players to their roster, and this accounts for the contracts they're going to have to give out after the draft. So in reality, this is the amount of money a team really has to spend. So again, when I say cap space, it's effective cap space. And I was going to do a video doing a deeper dive into each team's offseason and what they need to do to have a perfect offseason, but I decided to settle on this video format instead. If you want to see me do a deeper dive on any teams, let me know down in the comments and I'd be happy to do so. So let's start with a really solid division here in the AFC North. And we have to start with obviously the first place team here, the Baltimore Ravens. So another team that was an absolute juggernaut in the regular season, but again comes up short when it matters here in the playoffs against the other big guns in the AFC. Lamar had another MVP year. You could argue that he should have won MVP. He's been an MVP quarterback for a couple seasons now, but they just, like I said, they can't get it done in the postseason. So this team definitely still has that Super Bowl window open with Lamar, Derrick Henry, the emergence of Zay Flowers, a breakout year for Rashad Bateman. But the secondary needs to be addressed, man. If this team's going to win the Super Bowl, especially that cornerback room, you just allow the second most pass yards in the league, and you're playing teams like the Bills and the Chiefs in the playoffs, or even teams now like the Broncos and the Chargers, or the Texans. Like you got to fix that secondary. The problem here is that there's not a lot of cap space, which is expected for a team that of this caliber who already has most of its roster locked down. They have about less than 10 mil, and they have some decisions to make in free agency, especially on the O line this year. You have guys like Ronnie Stanley and Patrick McCarry who are free agents, and I don't think they're going to be able to retain these guys. But lucky for them, this is a really deep offensive tackle draft class. So I think they can grab a guy like Josh Cornerly out of Oregon near the end of the first round. And with Marlon Humphrey on the last year of his contract, you really need to start thinking about the future at the corner position. So you can address that through the draft, but this year in free agency, they definitely need to bring a guy in who can be a reliable second corner. I don't hate a guy, since considering they don't have that kind of money to splurge on, I don't hate a guy like Dante Jackson coming in, or one of those more lower key names out there. But yeah, probably have to find a new kicker too. But yeah, like I said, this Super Bowl window's still open, so we'll see what happens with them next year. So next we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is a team that made the playoffs under Mike Tomlin with a subpar offense. They were in the bottom half of the league in total yards, passing touchdowns, passing yards, and rushing touchdowns. So the biggest decision this team has in the offseason is, do they want to ride it out with Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, or just go a completely new direction? And I think for this team to win the Super Bowl next year, they go with a cheaper option in Justin Fields, who proved that he could win games with this roster in the beginning of the year. And please, Pittsburgh, fix this damn offense so you can make a real run in the postseason. You have about 40 million cap space. Bring in some weapons. We'll see if George Pickens gets traded this offseason, but Pickens alone isn't enough for you to get over the hump. So I think, as talented as I think Pickens is, you have a wide receiver room right now of Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, and that's not winning you a Super Bowl. Trade Pickens if you must on a contract year, but you need to target guys like Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuels, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, DK Metcalf, Garrett Wilson, everyone, anyone that's an option right now. You missed out on Ayuk last year. Go get him because you need it. For Justin Fields, for Russ, whoever it may be, to win the Super Bowl, you're going to need those guys. And then figure out what you're doing with Najee Harris. I don't think that's a make or break decision for him. He had a really solid year, but this is a really deep running back class in the draft. So we'll see. The defense is there, obviously anchored by TJ Watt. Um, and yeah, I say you win the Super Bowl by bringing in a talented offense around Fields and maybe boosting up that O line. And yes, seeing what happens there in a tough division. So now we'll go on to the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, so if we erase their defense off the face of the earth, other than Trey Hendrickson, this is a Super Bowl team because you might as well just, like I said, erase that defense off the face of the earth because those guys were out there playing patty cake every week, just collecting a paycheck. Your offense looked unstoppable under who I think probably would have won the MVP if they were had a better record and were on the Bills caliber this year with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase were lighting the league up this year. Jamar Chase, your Triple Crown winner, and yeah, man, Chase Brown emerged in that running back room. But yeah, like I said, unfortunately, this defense is just absolute garbage right now. That just the only thing they're good at is giving the other team points. So yeah, please, for the love of God, use your 45 million in cap space and get Joe Burrow some help on the other side of the field. You could even offload Sam Hubbard's $20 million contract because he was pretty below average this year, and you could get an upgrade on that other side with Trey Hendrickson. And yeah, man, like just fix that defense, bro. And if this team can work something out and keep T Higgins and stays healthy and just gets like a top 15 defense, this is a Super Bowl squad that the league needs to watch out for sure. They may be your 2026 Super Bowl champs. All right, now we'll go to the basement of this division, man. The Cleveland Browns. This one is a tall task. I'll just put it that way. I thought about this one for a long time. I feel awful for Kevin Stefanski because he's a really good head coach that finds a way to win games and lead this team it's just a cursed franchise. It looks like you're going to lose Myles Garrett this offseason, which is a huge loss. Obviously, a top 5 defensive player in the league. But the bright side of that is you're going to get an absolute haul. I could see at least 2 to 3 first round picks or 2 first round picks and a player. I wouldn't put it past them to make a dumb decision here and just basically give them away. But I don't think that's going to happen. They know there's a situation they're in, and they'll get a lot for him. And the unfortunate reality here is, for as bad as this team is, they're about $40 million in cap hell. And there's one man to blame for that, one very perverted loser man in Deshaun Watson. Dude, you paid this guy the bag and he just keeps getting hurt, keeps showing up in the media in not positive ways. I could make a whole another video about how this franchise can be saved, but for the sake of this video, for them to win a Super Bowl, these are the things that need to happen. You somehow, some way, offload Deshaun Watson's contract through a trade because you can't even cut him. If you cut him, you owe him over 140 mil over the next 2 years in dead cap. Or no, sorry, if you already owe him 140 mil over the next 2 years, but if you cut him, you owe him 172 mil in dead cap this year. Like, you can't even cut this man, even if you spread that dead cap out. So for this team to win the Super Bowl, they have to I don't know, man, just trade him somewhere. You have that's a necessity. You trade Myles Garrett, land a couple picks, hit on all those picks, re-sign Jameis Winston, hope Jerry Jeudy's a top 10 receiver. Bro, this is, like I said, it's a tall task, but you just hope that MVP Jameis Winston takes you to the promised land with the all-pro class of rookies. All right, so now we'll move on to the AFC East, and here we'll start with Buffalo. Yeah, man, I was rooting for them, obviously, in the AFC Championship. I think most of America was. They were almost there, but again, Mahomes and the Chiefs are the kryptonite here. I think this team already has a blueprint to win it all. especially when you have Josh Allen winning MVP and playing like that. They don't have a lot of freedom with the cap being in the negatives. They're bringing back their coaching staff, which is good. Joe Brady had a really good year with this offense. But to give them a better chance to win the Super Bowl, this secondary needs to be bolstered through free agency and the draft. And I think you really need to get Josh Allen another weapon here. So this wide receiver room was extremely solid for what it was, but Josh Allen elevated the game of the entire offense. So I would like to see them add a guy who can come in clutch in the in those game winning situations, kind of like we saw in the AFC Championship. I think the perfect fit here would be a guy like Cortland Sutton or Cooper Kupp through a trade, if they can stay healthy. And I mean, I would say Tyreek Hill here would be the perfect fit, but I don't envision that ever happening within the division. I don't think the Dolphins would ever trade him to Buffalo. But yeah, Buffalo was almost there. I think they'll still be in the thick of it next year. And yeah, I'm not too worried about this team. And now we'll move on, speaking of Tyreek Hill, to the Miami Dolphins. So this team has no hope to win the Super Bowl if Tua Tagovailoa is not healthy. Um, for the sake of not just the team, but just for that man's brain, man, I just hope he stays healthy. But more often than not this year, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill were non existent, which is crazy. And a lot of that obviously was due to Tua being out and just subpar quarterback play. But if this team wants to win the Super Bowl, the key is for this offense with Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tua to go out there and just destroy defenses. And for the most part, this team is returning. The defense was actually really solid last year. Again, like I said, it was mostly the offensive woes that really costed this team playoff berth. And I think they don't have a lot of cap space, being in the negatives, about 15 million, 17 million in the negatives. But I think you can trade a guy like Raheem Mostert to make some room, who he's on the last year of his contract. It wasn't the Raheem Mostert of years past. And you have a solid draft position at 13. And I think you really need to help that O-line and protect Tua. And you're going to have guys that are like Kevin Banks or Will Campbell. And yeah, the key to the Super Bowl here is letting a healthy offense just cook and just building off what the defense did last year. All right, and Jets fans, I promised you there's going to be a way. And I'm going to try to break down what I think is the way for you guys to win the Super Bowl this year. So obviously there's a lot of drama going around this organization right now. So Rodgers is confirmed gone, and I think in turn that means Devontae Adams is going to be traded, and Garrett Wilson's rumored to be. I think these are more. I don't think these rumors have any truth to them, but Garrett Wilson rumors have been flying around, and I think you guys keep them. And for the sake of this video, to win the Super Bowl, you're going to need to keep them. So you have an entirely new coaching staff coming in with Aaron Glenn coming in from Detroit, and you're bringing in Steve Wilks as your defensive coordinator. So your strength right there is going to be your defense. Those are both two geniuses on the defensive side of things in the NFL. And I think you need to play off that strength. And you already have a solid defense. The pieces are there. Just continue to win the Super Bowl this year. You continue to build off this defense. You currently have about 15 mil in cap, and you'll add a significant amount trading Tay away, who's getting paid about 20 mil right now. You'll have to end up cutting Rodgers because I don't think any team's going to end up trading him, knowing you're going to have to cut him, and you're going to owe him some dead cap spread over the next 2 years. So yeah, play to the strengths of these coaches, build off the solid pieces on defense. I think you guys are definitely the Jets are definitely gonna lose DJ Reed in free agency this year. So you can fill that hole really easily through the draft with Will Johnson at 7. Lockdown corner out of Michigan. Him and Sauce Gardner is going to be a nightmare for offenses, especially in this division when you're playing teams like Miami and Buffalo. And then I think the Pats are going to have a pretty good offseason, adding some receiver talent there. So yeah, build through this draft. Draft a tight end like Loveland, Gunnar Helm, or Fannin on day 2. Get Will Johnson in the first round. And for the love of God, don't draft a quarterback in this draft. I think you go the bridge quarterback route with like Jameis or Justin Fields. or Sam Darnold reunion maybe. And yeah, keep Garrett Wilson and have whatever quarterback you have a legit weapon. You have Brees Hall, and yeah, man, that's the key for them to win the Super Bowl this year, or for a chance to win the Super Bowl this year. So now we go to the last place team in this division in New England. And honestly, for the they were expected to not have a good season last year. You're bringing in a rookie quarterback. You lose Bill Belichick. The franchise has been kind of in the gutter since Brady's been gone. But honestly, as a Pats fan, I would have some hope here. There's honestly a lot to like here because you have Drake May, who looks like your franchise quarterback, which is huge. You most likely didn't miss on that pick. You have the most cap space in the league by over a mile, over $100 million. And you're bringing in Vrabel, who has a pretty good resume as an NFL coach. And I think that's an upgrade at head coach. But the truth is, this roster is absolute trash. And I have a lot of friends who are Pats fans who are always swearing about a couple of guys on this roster who, as a outsider fan of the, as a fan of the league who's not a Pats fan, these guys are trash, man. So this team needs a complete makeover to win the Super Bowl this year. But like I said, they have the cap space, they have the draft capital to do it, and yeah, I mean, they have top four picks in the first and second round, and they have two picks in the third round. So that's huge. And then, so to win the Super Bowl, I think they got to give T. Higgins a bag, get him into New England, get Drake May some real receiver help there, a solid threat. You take Travis Hunter at 4. That's a cornerstone piece for any franchise. I'm not sure about cornerback, wide receiver. That's an argument to have later on. And then honestly, I think the secondary is already pretty decent with Christian Gonzalez there. You can just use that money to just bolster up that front seven. And yeah, man, just get Drake May some certified toys here. And I think that's your best chance at looking at a Super Bowl run this year. All right, now we move on to the AFC South. And we'll start with the Houston Texans. And I know they made the playoffs, but honestly, the underwhelming Houston Texans and underwhelming CJ Stroud. Something felt missing here from compared to 2 seasons ago, and I think a lot of that has to be with a little bit of regression from Stroud and just that rookie hype dying down from Stroud because he was lighting up the league his rookie year. The Tank Dell injuries and Stephon Diggs injuries were really unfortunate because they were at least Stephon was contributing really well alongside Nico. Not a lot of cap room here this offseason, which should be expected for a roster that's talented. And honestly, I thought last offseason Houston made the moves they think they needed to make that jump to being a Super Bowl team. So, but they did that with the expectation that Stroud would be an MVP-like quarterback. And yeah, like I said, due to that regression, the offense struggled this year. Their numbers were not great statistically, but you have the team in place to make a Super Bowl run. The Joe Mixon signing was a really good signing to help with that run game too. So I think for this team to win the Super Bowl, you need Stroud to bounce back, be a top 5 quarterback. You have Nico Collins, who's going to be a bona fide top 10, maybe top 5 to 7 receiver next year. You let Diggs walk. I think this Tank Dell injury is going to be really hard for him to come back from. At least I don't think he'll be ready for the beginning of the season. I think you bring in Brandon Cooks, man. He was really good wide receiver 2 for Dallas, and I think he's going to be a consistent guy for this team. They don't need a star at the second wide receiver position. They have Nico Collins. Get Brandon Cooks, a guy who puts in the work week in, week out. He'll get open. He'll catch the ball. And like I said, the pieces are already there. So use this draft to patch up any holes like tight end, add any depth you think needs to be added. And yeah, this team is well poised for a Super Bowl run next year. And they'll go as far as Stroud can take them. So the rest of this division is honestly pretty weak. We got the Colts next. And this is another quarterback from that 2023 draft class that disappointed. We saw some regression from AR for sure. There was like points of the season where people were like writing him off as a bust. So you need AR to do his thing here, be that dual threat quarterback. and not throw picks because that was a problem. There were some really bad picks there throughout the year. But you have a great young head coach in Shane Steichen who knows what he's doing, found a way to win games with Flacco. And this is a really poor defense that needs some fixing. You have pick 14. I think you start by taking the best available guy to really help your front seven there. I would like to see guys like Michael Williams, Kenneth Grant, Shamar Stewart, James Pierce help with that edge DT position. And I would like to see them address the tight end position for sure. Tyler Warren at Penn State, or out of Penn State at 14, I would not hate that pick. He's going to be the first tight end taken, and I think he's well warranted for the Colts considering their tight end depth. And a really key component I'd like to see from this team to win the Super or make a Super Bowl run is the emergence of Adonai Mitchell. I was pretty sold on AD Mitchell's athleticism going into last year's draft. And you have Michael Pittman, who's a solid, he's your wide receiver one. If AD Mitchell can take that step to being that wide receiver one, certified wide receiver two type of guy, you have a really good offense in Pittman, JT, AD Mitchell, and AR's dual threat ability. So if you can get a juggernaut offense going this next season and build an elite level defense, like a top 10 defense through the draft or through free agency in a weak division with opportunity, I think this team has a roadmap to the Super Bowl. And now we'll get to the basement of this division, which is quite a basement, guys, quite a basement. So we'll start with the Jags. Really bad season, finishing 4-13, T-Law getting hurt. And yeah, bottom line, this defense needs some fixing. They allowed the second most total yards in the league this year, most passing yards in the league this year. You have Josh Hines Allen balling out. You've locked him down, which is huge. That needed to be done. But outside of him, I don't read names on this defense, and no fear is instilled in me as a fan of the sport. And if my team were to play him, I wouldn't be scared of anyone aside of him. That secondary is absolute trash, man. They'll have to address some positions through free agency with not the best cap situation at about 28 mil. That's like the bottom half of the league. But the one bright side of this season was you have a bona fide superstar wide receiver one in Brian Thomas Jr. So knowing that, you have the freedom to trade Christian Kirk this offseason, who he's due about 24 mil, and I think he may have 2 years left on his contract, but either way, you don't need him anymore. BTJ's on his rookie contract, but if you were to pay anyone 24 mil, it would be him. So trade Christian Kirk to a team looking for a receiver too. And honestly, you could go ahead and trade ETN. ETN had a really good year 2 years ago, but it looked like last year Tank Bigsby was taking a lot of those carries. ETN had some health issues. He's on the last year of his contract, and I think you'd have a team like Dallas, Denver, Oakland. There's a few teams, or Vegas, sorry. There's a few teams out there that I think would love to give up a day 3 pick, maybe a late day 2 pick for ETN. And yeah, you could always add a running back late in this draft pair with Bigsby. Like I said, it's a pretty deep running back class. And to win the Super Bowl, they'll need, like I said, their secondary is really weak, but they'll need more than a corner. So I think the roadmap for them to make a Super Bowl run is you draft Mason Graham at 5, get some interior help there on the D-line with Josh Hines Allen, and then you go and try to land a guy like DJ Reed, Charvarius Ward in free agency. But if we're being realistic, I don't think they get either one of them. And I don't hate the idea of them going for Carlton Davis on a team-friendly deal. Maybe like a 1-year prove-it deal or a 2-year team-friendly deal. Because Carlton Davis was part of the Lions' problems last year. And I think he's going to have to settle for a team like the Jags. No disrespect there. And then you have Liam Cohen coming in from Tampa. He got the best. He got Baker and the guys rolling. So I think it was honestly a pretty good roll the dice hire for the Jags. And obviously you're going to need T-Law healthy and get him back to that number 1 overall pick, generational talent type of guy. But yeah, with this ownership, man, there's some problems here. But I guess there is a way for them to go to the Super Bowl and win it, and that's the way. So now this is going to be the somehow a bigger long shot than the Browns, man. The Tennessee Titans. So God, when I look at this roster, I'm just like appalled, man. I'm appalled. There's no other way to put it. So there's at least they have the number one overall pick. So there's two ways they could go here. Either they draft Cam Ward at number one, and he has a Jaden Daniels like season. They address their defense and their O line through free agency and the rest of their picks, and they go win the Super Bowl. The other way is they draft a guy like Abdul Carter at one, get a bridge quarterback while still addressing their run D and O line through the draft and free agency, and they go to the Super Bowl. But I don't think either of these are realistic, and I'm gonna try to be as realistic as possible. And I kind of have to venture out for this take. So I think this is the roadmap to the Super Bowl this year. They trade back from 1 to 6 to Oakland or Vegas because Vegas wants to jump the rest of the draft, grab the quarterback they want, and Cam Ward, Shadur, whoever it may be. And from Vegas, they get 1.06, sixth overall pick. They get the fifth, they get 2.05, which I think is pick 35 in the second round, and whatever future first round picks, players, whatever. But we're just going to focus on this year's picks because it's how are they going to win the Super Bowl this upcoming year. So you do that, and at 6, you take Mason Graham. You need help all around on this team, and I think he can be an anchor on that D line. And then you use 35 and that you just traded for and your own second round pick in 37. Or sorry, the Raiders pick in 37 and your own pick in 35 to land a combo of OT and receiver. They need a tackle. This O line was pretty weak last year, and you're gonna want to protect whatever quarterbacks over there. So you got guys like Josh Conley out of Oregon, or Ursary, and then some wide receivers here that could target, or Matthew Golden out of Texas, or just guys like that. Just add some talent on the squad. And in this scenario, then they wouldn't have a quarterback because I don't think Levis is that guy at all. Um, so, like I said, this one's a long shot, but go with a guy like Jameis, Darnold, Rodgers. Hope they have a great year, like a Darnold type of year in Minnesota this year. And you just got to hope that Calvin Ridley plays like the $20 million receiver he's being paid to be. And yeah, that's how they win the Super Bowl. All right, and then we got one here that I don't think needs a lot of time spent on. That's Kansas City. There's a lot of recency bias here because they lost the Super Bowl. Mahomes had a down year, and they got blown out in the Super Bowl. It wasn't just a Super Bowl loss. But honestly, I think this team's fine, man. It's Kansas City. It's Mahomes. It was pretty clear throughout the year, though, that they were barely squeezing by and winning some of these games. And I think a lot of people, including myself, thought that this was just a symptom of them knowing all they need to do is make the playoffs. So they were just not trying as hard and just kind of cruising. And then once they got to the playoffs, I mean, obviously they made it to the Super Bowl. They made it out of a pretty challenging, top heavy AFC. But still, they made it to the Super Bowl and they were there. Um, but one of the things that I think was pretty evident here was that part of this Mahomes down year was the fact that he didn't have those receiving threats. Rasheed Rice getting hurt was brutal because I think people forget how great of a year he was having and the numbers he was putting up. DeAndre Hopkins, man, had that drop in the Super Bowl. He had a good game or two in the regular season, but nothing to write home about. You had Kelsey, who showed true regression. I thought he'd have a better playoffs and Super Bowl, but it never came. We'll see if he's even playing next year. But even if he does, you gotta proceed here knowing he's not Mahomes' number one guy anymore. So I think this team to make another Super Bowl run next year and win it, they'll need a lethal wide receiver 1 and 2 pairing with Rasheed Rice and Xavier Worthy. Worthy had a really good Super Bowl. He's got that speed. I think the two of them could do some damage. And I think Pacheco will be a lot better next year. He's going to have a whole offseason to completely recover from that injury. And Mahomes will have a chip on his shoulder with all the offseason narratives. Andy Reid's going to be pretty motivated. You have Chris Jones. You have a team that's going to want to get their place back at the top. So I'm not going to doubt this team. They're going to use the draft to patch up any holes. I think this is a front office that's going to definitely sit down and reassess a lot of things this offseason. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him back in the Super Bowl and winning it next year. And next we'll move to the Chargers. So this is a team that really, really surprised me this last season. So Harbaugh proved he still got what it takes to be a successful NFL coach. And they entered the season with some really solid cap. They're at about 55 mil, which is really good. I think that's like top 30% of the league, 35% of the league. And you have some pending free agents that have a market: Khalil Mack, Denzel Perryman, Asante Samuel, J.K. Dobbins. So you have some decisions to make there. And this defense was top 12 last year, and they ran the ball a lot last year. I think they had a solid group of guys, and Justin Herbert had a really good year. So you're going to have some decisions to make with these free agents, deciding whether you think you can upgrade from them or you need them back to kind of have that winning recipe from this previous season. You have your QB, obviously, in Herbert, like I just said, so there's not an issue there. Here's what I think they need to do to win the Super Bowl and beat out a team like KC. So you're a run-heavy team. I think J.K. Dobbins is going to end up getting a pretty solid contract elsewhere that you're not going to be willing to pay for a player who has some injury history. So I think you bring in a guy like Najee Harris to pair with Gus Edwards for a solid 1-2 punch. I think Najee fits the mold of this team really well. And you need to find an upgrade alongside at receiver alongside Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey was a stud to end the year, but outside of him, there was no receiving threats on this team. Quentin Johnson had some flashes earlier in the year, but I'm not sold on him coming out of the draft last year or 2 years ago. You got to address that through free agency, trades, or the draft. And you already have a great blocking tight end in Will Dissly, but I think you use some of maybe a day 2 pick to land a tight end who can be a receiving threat, because Will Dissly isn't known to be a receiving threat. And I think if you need that blocking tight end on a run-heavy team, and then by adding that 2 tight end set, you can do some damage. So yeah, that's the way they build off last season to go to the Super Bowl. And all right, now this team is a very interesting one for me, and that's the Denver Broncos. So you have Bo Nix and Sean Payton, who did some really great things last year. This team went 10-7 in the post-Russell Wilson era, and they made the playoffs in a competitive AFC West. I didn't expect this. The defense was elite last year with Defensive Player of the Year Patrick Surtain. And the good news is most of these guys are coming back. You have a few guys that are unrestricted free agents, but for the most part, you're locked in with these guys, and you have about 33 mil in cap space to make some decisions on either of those guys that are free agents, or if you think there's upgrades available out there. Their O-line was the best in the league, and I think for this team to win the Super Bowl next year, they need to take full advantage of this O-line. I thought their running back room was pretty underwhelming. I was a big Javonte Williams believer back in the day, but after the injuries and the subpar play this last season, I think you let him walk in free agency this year. And you formulate a new 1-2 punch. I think you get a lead back like Aaron Jones, trade for Travis Etienne, sign Najee Harris, give Rico Dowdle a 1 or 2 year deal, and then I honestly think you double down on running back and draft the opposite style running back on day 3 of this year's draft. Like I said, this is a super deep draft. So if you can land in free agency or through trade a receiving back, I would love to see them draft the power back or vice versa. And this is under the assumption that they don't think Estime is the guy who they drafted late last year. And I think there's some upgrades out there to be had over Estime. And then I think in the first round, they definitely need an upgrade at tight end. this you can't ride out Adam Troutman as your number one tight end next year, and Noah Fant wasn't it. I think you go grab one of those top tier guys like Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland, and that'll be a huge upgrade for them at tight end. And I think for them to win the Super Bowl next year, you don't trade Cortland Sutton. I know he's got a pretty good cap hit last year of his contract, but he was huge for Bo Nix. And I think you keep adding weapons to Bo Nix's arsenal. Like, honestly, I could see George Pickens being a good fit here, or Debo Samuels. I know George Pickens has some character issues, but if he ends up getting traded, I would, hey man, Sean Payton coached Michael Thomas, who wasn't a saint. So I'd go get that done with George Pickens. Cortland Sutton, George Pickens with a good 1-2 punch at running back, and one of these elite tight end prospects. That's a scary offense with an already scary defense. And I think, man, this team's in really good shape to turn some heads next year and seriously have a shot at the Super Bowl. And last but not least, the Vegas Raiders. So this team, honestly, was basically unwatchable last year with the lack of talent outside of Brock Bowers and Max Crosby, and I guess like Dexter Lawrence, who kind of had a pretty down year, in my opinion at least. But the good news here is that Pete Carroll was a really, really good hire out of nowhere, kind of, to right the ship. He was amazing in Seattle, and I think this is huge for the culture of the Vegas Raiders and just the direction of this franchise as a whole, at least for the next couple years. But there's so many holes on this team. But they have the second most cap in the league, and they have the draft position for being a bad team last year. They have about 90 million cap, so close to the Patriots, but still a little bit far off. And it's really hard to fathom a way this team wins the Super Bowl next year. But for the sake of this video, I think to win the Super Bowl, you draft Cam Ward at 6. Hope he has a Jaden Daniels like year, and I've seen those Rodgers rumors. I don't think a quarterback like that will work here, not just for a Super Bowl this year, but just in general. I think you go with Cam Ward here. And then you continue to build off what you do have. Like Jacoby Myers has got an extension. You have Brock Bowers, who's looking like he's going to be the next best tight end in this league. So you add some wide receiver help for Cam Ward. And I think you should go sign a running back like Rico Dowdle for a short-term deal, or J.K. Dobbins. And you add some O-line help through this draft. And then you let Pete Carroll and the front office just ball out in defense and build a respectable roster. Pete Carroll knows what he's doing. And I for this team to win the Super Bowl, have full faith in your new head coach. And yeah, man, that's the key. So yeah, that's every team in the AFC. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Any takes you agree with, disagree with? Anything I said sounds crazy? Do you think any AFC teams are going to be surprising next year? Just drop it all down below in the comments. And I already posted a video for the NFC. So yeah, definitely check that out. And yeah, man, I'll see y'all soon. Peace.